All right, so we will now start with our panel on service learning research. This panel features Beatriz Bowman from the Southwest Northwest University, Enrique Ochoa, Executive Director of CLAYSS, and Maria Alejandra Herrero from the University of Buenos Aires and CLAYSS. So I'll give the floor to Enrique for him to start this panel. All right. Good afternoon. Thanks to all the brave people who stay here until this late hour. We know this is a long day. We started quite early, and we know that all the sessions have been quite intense, and you worked very hard. So thank you for that. Secondly, let me also quickly say that I have Bibi Baumann next to me. She's a friend of ours. She will be standing in for Andy Furco, who is mentioned on the program. He had a personal problem in the last minute, so he couldn't travel to Buenos Aires, but he was going to present the global agenda that he presented in South Africa last week, and he was generous to provide Bibi with his PowerPoint presentation, and Bibi was kind enough to take on the challenge of replacing him in this panel. In this panel, we seek to have an overview of the work that we have done in CLAYSS in terms of research on service learning. As I will be in charge of showing you what we have done. Then we have Alejandra Herrero, who is an agronomist engineer, but she was also the president of CLAYSS for some years, and she knows a lot about service learning research, and she is here to tell us more about the researcher symposium that we had yesterday in the School of Dentistry of the University of Buenos Aires. She's going to share some thoughts about the prospects for service learning research based on what they discussed yesterday and other information. And Bibi is going to present to us the global research agenda. So, in terms of CLAYSS, from its very beginning, CLAYSS has led knowledge production processes in the field of service learning through research works that show the state of the art with contributions made by CLAYSS's own programs, with network creation, and also with the work done in terms of public policy. I should also highlight that all our programs have monitoring and evaluation components, and these are actions that are needed to understand the impact of projects and programs, and that later on also serve as a very good tool for further research. And I have monitoring and evaluation separately here in the second paragraph because it's not necessarily the same as research or does not necessarily imply further research, but in all the programs where we include monitoring and evaluation actions in CLAYSS, usually we use that information, those outputs, for research work, but they remain as tools that can be used for research work. Nieves had a research article on in the Service Inquiry Journal in 2003, and all that was the starting point for a large number of publications that are available on our website. Sometimes we need to explain why we need to do research and produce knowledge from CLAYSS in the field of service learning. CLAYSS is not a university. Of course, we are not a think tank. We are not a purely academic or research-oriented organization. We are a civil association, a civil organization, and oftentimes we try to keep a record of what we do. We document what we do for different reasons. because we need to communicate this information for different purposes. Sometimes we need to be accountable, or we need to contribute to the field where we work on. We need to influence public policies. So we need arguments to make a business case in front of a donor to get funding for the program, to influence public policies, to convince others that they are going to create a service learning network. So we need evidence for that. Experiences that are very nice. Sometimes what we need is empirical evidence. Secondly, we do research because we need to train the people who are part of our organization, and oftentimes we need research papers that support what we are going to preach in our courses or in our trainings, or what we are going to promote from the capacity building department in CLAYSS. We also need to do research because knowledge production and knowledge dissemination follows specific rules, has some specific validations and checks and consolidations. So we keep manuals as registers of experiences that we take to the teachers, to faculty, to principals, and we also need those materials to be supported with research. And then I also see that oftentimes we may do research into topics that formal institutions don't take into consideration. Although we work with them, usually we do that from the outside. We are not within the university or the school. So sometimes we identify some topics that those institutions don't see so clearly. And the truth is that in order to have research as data systematization when we support some initiatives because the organization so require, or because we are part of a specific program, we could just stop there with data systematization just to have some accountability record for that organization or for a donor, for instance. We could have just one more line in a final report by way of conclusion, or the evaluation in a report, and oftentimes that has been the case. It is just a final evaluation. But whenever we can, we try to go a step further and do research that shows the impact of what we do. Let me also say that if you want to find out more research areas in the field of service learning, or how to turn some field experiences into the subject matter of research work, we will have a workshop tomorrow in the afternoon, so you can attend that workshop. So, let me tell you about our research work. With the systematization of reports in our different programs, we have produced a wide range of materials. We have a big network of support to education institutions. We have the Natura program, different support programs in Uruguay and Argentina that have had an evaluation report that ended up turning into impact assessment. We also systematize reports from our service learning in the arts program. We also have our program on service learning with integral ecology, the promotion of service learning in Central and Eastern Europe. So all these programs had ended with some research work showing the impact and the outcomes of those programs. In terms of public policy advocacy, one of the latest publications, and in my opinion, one of the best ones that we have produced, based on our lived experience, was a comparative analysis of public policies of Uruguay and Argentina. So all these are freely available for you. You can download them from our website. They are at your disposal, okay? And the biggest program, the global program to provide support to Catholic universities, that has a monitoring and evaluation area that is constantly producing results and validates what universities are going through. As a result of the researcher symposium, like the one we had yesterday, we have proceedings. We have all the proceedings from the previous seminars, the previous symposia. We will also do the same with yesterday's meeting. In these symposiums, we give the possibility of exchanging information among different research groups. They can supplement one another. They can share their experiences. They can collaborate with research projects. Of course, we have a lot of research work done at the university level, but we also have national service learning networks, other institutions that also do research on the impact of service learning in schools or in other areas. So we have a long tradition of research outcomes through these symposia. We call them HIAs in Spanish by the acronym. And us in civil society, we are like an umbrella organization that allow different players to connect with one another. In the symposium, in the researcher symposium, you can tell that researchers in higher education usually see the same faces, and it's very difficult for them to connect to those researchers in other levels of education. So all these proceedings, these minutes are available to you. Then we have RIDAS, and that is the Service Learning Ibero-American Journal. It is an Ibero-American publication. It is indexed. It has peer review. It came out of an initiative of our own network. It is a digital publication free of charge that is co-edited by the University of Barcelona and CLAYSS. It is in its 15th year of existence, and it has published 19 issues already. So this shows the constant evolution of research work in the field of service learning that is so valuable. It publishes different experiences, literature reviews, some specific monographs like on networks that do not exist as part of the research literature. So why do we do research? Because sometimes we see some topics that are not present in some institutions. The first scientific journal of the Ibero-American network was one published with the University Señor de Zipan from Peru. So doing research matters, and it's not just a matter of writing what we are required to write about from the academia or what others publish. We can do our own research. And let me go back to Uniservitate. I have a specific slide on this. Uniservitate follows two lines of work. Research led by the sounding board. There are many members of the board here. Bibi is one of them. The board supports research and reflection processes on the spiritual dimension of service learning with a multicultural perspective. And this is also unprecedented because we are talking about service learning from a multicultural perspective with a spiritual dimension. So this is really quite original. And then we also have the small research grants program. The first edition took place between 2023 and 2024 and distributed funds among 33 research papers developed by 28 universities from 18 countries in the 5 continents. Many of those projects were presented during the 5th Global Uniservitate Symposium that took place last November in Rome. And that was a great opportunity for us to get to know the diversity and the richness of the different papers. And we will have a new call for papers and for these grants this year. This is a dream that Nieves and Maria Rosa had when they talked about the Alexandra Library in service learning. They have the Uniservitate repository that has reached this figure of 1,000 papers and resources available on service learning. And this is free of charge, and you can access it from our network. Now, in closing, some tensions and challenges. I think that Alejandra is going to touch on this, but let me also say that we see a growing number of research papers of different quality. It is We have contributed to the global research agenda that was presented last week in the IO-CLAYSS conference. Bibi is going to tell us more about that. But it is important to do compared research to compare what happens in different regions. And for us in CLAYSS, this has been quite a challenge because we organize different workshops within the global program to contribute to the regional Latin American agenda that later on contributed to the global agenda. And the challenges for us, at least in our view, this may resonate with you. We still have problems in overcoming the anecdotal aspect. All of us try to collaborate with robust methodologies to broaden the sample. The cases are usually valuable, but because of the type of support that CLAYSS provides, CLAYSS does not provide support to thousands of organizations at the same time. So usually the samples are small. The sample size is small. So the cases are valuable, but we need to expand the sample, and I think that's a challenge in itself. And let me say that we try to raise the bar, as I said originally, without being a university, without having all the academic or financial resources that a university may have. Sometimes we don't have the networks for the necessary support, but we try to contribute to production of knowledge from the civil society, and we also try to contribute to the field of research. In a country where this is still difficult, we know in Argentina that it's very difficult to do research. Government bodies that promote research find it hard to be recognized in public speeches. Sometimes officials challenge the topics of research, and they think that there are certain topics that cannot be investigated into. But those of us have to explain why we do research, why we produce knowledge in a field like service learning. This is what we chose as a methodology to change the world, so it makes all the sense to use it to do research. Okay, good afternoon. It was quite difficult for me to put this presentation together because I wanted to speak not just to researchers who are doing great jobs, but also to teachers who are just beginning to do research. Because I would like to speak from my background with a degree in scientific policy, but also as a teacher who started with a project on water management in 1995, so 30 years ago. So I love going to the field of research into service learning. So let me split my presentation in two parts. First, I want to show you what happened in yesterday's researchers symposium and what has been happening in the last few years, mainly focusing on the discussions yesterday. And then I'm going to talk about challenges and share some thoughts on the approach of research from the field of service learning. For your knowledge, the Service Learning Researchers Symposium was created with intention of becoming a CLAYSS promoted space. It is still promoted by CLAYSS, but it also has the support of other organizations in order to disseminate the advances in the field of service learning, to promote exchanges and learnings among different education levels, because there we find secondary school teachers and primary school teachers who also present their experiences. So the learning process becomes richer because all of us are there. It doesn't matter what education level we belong to. And we also have this space to foster collaboration. If we look at the timeline of this symposia, we started with some conferences, initially at the University of San Andres. Those were interesting, but we were just conferences. So we took a quantum leap. We set these objectives for ourselves, and we had another meeting or symposium in 2012, then in 2015, 2017, 2019, the fifth ones. Then we had to wait because of the pandemic until 2023, and then the seventh symposium in 2025. In all the cases, we have the minutes, the proceedings of these symposia, and I encourage you to go and find them and read them because there are a lot of inspiring experiences. We also included a section in the writers, the research publication, and then we brought in all the strength of the Uniservitate program to meet all the goals that we have set for ourselves for these meetings. So perhaps you just see three faces as part of the organizing committee, but behind this symposium, you have lots of people from different parts of the world that collaborate with the assessment of the papers, their criticism, their comments, and many other tasks. So usually we have three sections. First, on theoretical contributions. First, focus on the definition of service learning. And with Uniservitate's creation, we started looking at solidarity, spirituality, religiosity. So here, and fraternity. So here we expanded our universe. The second section focuses on program monitoring and evaluation. So here we focus on monitoring and evaluation of institutional programs, institutional policies, and promotion of service learning. So we talk about the programs, the indicators, etc. And the third section has to do with case studies and programs and practice systematization. And here you can see some trends over the last few years. Of course, it is more difficult to have more papers for theoretical contributions, but this was re-energized with the emergence of this Uniservitate program. We always see growth in evaluation because we were interested in assessing, evaluating our own practices, so we had to look at monitoring of institutionalization. So we have a stable percentage for the presentation of practices, not just by telling, well, this is what I did. We get some figures, how many students were involved, what happened in the community. So we try to make sure that this is a comprehensive experience, the full experience. Here you see some percentages for this last edition. In the first section, you have 16% of the papers. For section 2, 35%, and section 3, the experiences, we always get close to 50%. The number of papers may vary. That also depends on the different possibilities, because usually half or more than half of the papers come from Latin American countries, and then we have papers from other countries. That will depend on the traveling possibilities, the support from other institutions so that researchers can participate, etc. But this is also an important figure because we can share what is happening all over the world, and we can learn from other people's work. Now, let me refer to the theoretical contributions that seem to be more significant in the latest meetings. And these notions were also mentioned today. We see now some new concepts, and some of them are quite strong. So now we see that there are a lot of mentions of the community traditional knowledge. This has been seen yesterday, but also in today's conference. The co-creation of knowledge, quite a strong notion that hadn't been discussed that much. The respect for community demands, both general and individual. Then I'm going to expand on this. There is a specific paper from India, and I found it quite interesting. In the rural setting, they work with different communities that are quite close to one another, but they have their own cultural identity. So the project gets a new dimension for each community because it respects their individual cultural identity. And then good participatory diagnosis and action and participatory research processes. Today we speak about sustainability all the time, but as a teacher, that has been a concern for me throughout my career. We submit sustainable projects, but have you wondered what will happen in the community once the project is over, when you leave or when you retire and leave the university or the school? I was tortured by that concern for many years. And I think that there are many teachers. I tried to do a survey and they are about to retire and they had this recurring concern, sustainability. We also see a notion referring to public policies. In today's panel, we talked a lot about this. We also had a paper yesterday, recognition by different local institutions that something is being done, institutional networks, and the need for new teachers training models. Of course, we always train people in class, but we always see emergent needs. So up to here, well, I referred to the research meeting, but now let me shift gears and talk about challenges and reflections, considering the potential power of service learning. Daniela Gargantini gave a talk the other day and she said, you can do research on service learning or from the field of service learning. So I think that we need to look at the challenges from that perspective. Why? Because service learning projects have a community and an institution working together. And for many settings, this is still new. There is a space of dialogue that is built through the daily work. And this is quite important. We recognize that there is another individual that may have a different way of working. We bring different generations together with authorities, students, and teachers. And we also work with different disciplines. But that is not enough. I see that with all this potential, some challenges emerge. We need engaged researchers. We also see the emergence of this concept of co-creation through social construction in order to leave this idea of just having a mere transfer of knowledge, as we usually see in extension projects, to incorporate truly participatory research. Participatory research is also what the kindergarten students did in Cordoba. You will need to instill this curiosity already from the primary school. And in participatory research, we need to add those voices that are usually silent, that lead us to the ecology of knowledge, respecting other people's cultures, and going back to the African work on Ubuntu, I am because we are. So they start from this consideration of a different cultural view, and they can run their projects from there. Otherwise, they cannot do it. And interdisciplinary work seems to be so difficult, but it has existed for so long. We have spoken for years to move to transdisciplinary work, and we haven't even mentioned it here. And it is a challenge. And then translating knowledge, I will tell you more about that, and working on relational sustainability. So let me devote one slide to each of these points. I would like to thank Gerardo Bridi because he came up with this solidarity model, and I borrowed it from him to give an explanation about research. He is, of course, a part of CLAYSS. The traditional research model has a researcher isolated from the environment, producing a certain knowledge that is spread to the community. The community is the recipient and receives it and sometimes pays for that. But in an engaged research model, in a horizontal model, the researcher and the community work together and knowledge is shared, and the community owns that knowledge because it is part of the construction of that knowledge. So there are things that both the research and the community know and ignore, and together they can do research. In this new process for developing knowledge, we have different new paths. Sometimes we are asked how many papers you wrote this year, what was the impact, but never they ask you how many problems you solved, have you produced new knowledge for your community or for an individual. And here comes into play the notion of participatory research. This is not new, but I took the liberty here to take from one of the books on research and community from people that have participated with us in CLAYSS in the network led by Raquel Tandon about Hall. You have here all the names with participatory and all the papers dealing with participatory research in the 1990s. So this is not new, but it is quite difficult for us to bring this into our projects. But with participatory research, you guarantee sustainability in the community because there is collective work. The community is also a co-producer of knowledge, not just an ally. Yesterday, we talked about being co-educators with the community, moving from pure diagnosis to true problem solving. This is research generated together with the people, with a dialogue with knowledge, traditional or community knowledge that may be hidden and need to come to light when we start working with the community. So we see transdisciplinary work as an approach to deal with a complex problem in a comprehensive manner, and we also need to translate knowledge. I will leave you with this presentation anyway, but I just wanted to highlight that here we talk about reciprocity, the collective well-being, and relationality, or the ability to establish relationships. So this is moving from a language-based philosophy to a listening-based philosophy to rethink an inclusive science. So here we are creating new knowledge. We are working with different disciplines. We have to be capable of doing nothing in our methodological mind to interact with others that bring a new conceptual framework so that the borders of disciplines fade away. This is not easy, but this has been discussed since the 1990s. This is ideal to address complex problems, and it includes science, experience, and values. let me give you one example, and I love it. This is from Brazil. I hope my Brazilian colleagues know more about this than me. I have a friend who was a biologist, and she would work in the wetlands, and this has to do with knowledge translators. In the wetlands, when there is a lot of rain, you see a lot of dead fish. I specialize in water quality, and this is called eutrophication. So there is lack of oxygen, so fish die. But for the last element in the chain, the fissures, the phenomenon is called dequada. But there are multiple factors that contribute to this: deforestation, floods, coal mines, fire, pollution, and then you have politicians, researchers, community, and decision makers. This was an interdisciplinary project that addressed this phenomenon. There is a published paper, and they spent 6 months looking for the term to translate the knowledge to work with that community. And the notion was the river does not breathe. And everybody know what the problem was caused by. So it is important to apply the proper words when we have an exchange with the community. And this is a new concept. Last year with Nieves, we attended the Congress, and now there is a new term that is a new paradigm, that is relational sustainability. It focuses on bonds and relations, and it says that the true sustainability will not happen unless we work on relations. So what is the purpose? To look at the entire reality in all its complexity. The method, transdisciplinary work, because it brings to here a new intellectual approach to understand complex systems. It doesn't seek to replace or oppose to other approaches, but rather to harmonize its contributions, provided that they lead to a comprehensive sustainability for humankind. Science and technology will play a leading role, but the center of attention is displaced, shifted towards relations with environment, social issues, and economic issues. So the true sustainability, it leaves the term itself in order to focus on relations. And this is something that we need to explore. I'm not going to read all this summary. These are the characteristics of a good quality service learning project. Adding an interaction with different partners in participatory research, looking for these knowledge translators, and focus on relational sustainability.
Bueno, pero esta ya la tenemos.
This is forward. Yeah. Okay. Buenos tardes. This is a very interesting opportunity for me to stand in for our dear Professor Andrew Furco. It's big shoes to fill because he's legendary in our organization here. But before I start with the talk, I want to just reflect on what happened during the International Association for Research and Service Learning Community Engagement 25-year celebrations in Durban. So this conference took place a week ago in Durban, in South Africa. And I want to acknowledge some of the board members that provided me with the data so that I could share this with you. So George Luke is a board member, and he's from Give Pulse, but also a prominent partner from there is the Carnegie Foundation, presented by Marisol Morales here in the meeting. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the size of the conference, there are more or less 300 attendees. 21 countries were represented, 6 continents, and I think 33 roundtable discussions took place, 38 research papers were presented, 19 posters, and 36 lightning talks. Okay, with that, I want to give you the presentation that was the draft findings for the global agenda taking place in the future. The formal presentation and the documentation will still be released later by ISLAS. Okay, so firstly, this research already started in March 2019 to investigate the research space in service learning and community engagement. Yeah, and in this space, you can see that there has been a lot of questions answered, 1,277. They were answered across 10 different topics and in several continents and countries. Okay, the table identifies the number of themes that include each section in the regional areas. That's the top number. The bottom number is the total number of research questions that are included in the agenda on each section. Okay, so the overview, I think what is important here is that the goal of the global agenda is to identify research questions to advance service learning and community engagement across the educational spectrum. Within the agenda, based on the information that was collected over 29 forums, the Asia, Europe and South Latin American agendas focus heavily on service learning, while other agendas have more of a balance of service learning and community. Most focus is on the work pertaining to service learning and community engagement in higher education, with minimal attention to work with primary and secondary school settings. Okay, I didn't expect that, but you can see that 65% of the focus exclusively is on higher education, and then 30% on all levels and 5% in the primary and secondary sector. The structure of the agenda included 10 topics, and there's a summary of that or a shortening of that in the table. So this is just to give you an idea what those mean. But the research agenda sections will be discussed in general themes in the following slides. So I'm going to discuss the whole slide quickly because waiting for each one section to come up is not going to work for me. There continues to be a strong emphasis on research questions that explore student outcomes. Perhaps some new areas of focus are questions to explore the impact of service learning and community engagement on the students' mental health, spirituality, multicultural awareness, and long-term outcomes. There is a heavy focus on the agenda on exploring the impact of service learning and community engagement on the community. This is an area that is lacking currently in the literature. The agenda also has questions that focus on the impact on staff, which is great to see, since there has been a group that has not been widely considered in previous research. There are also questions about examining the unintended consequences of service learning and community engagement, which is a new focus for research. Okay, so in implementation, there's a strong emphasis on the agenda on issues pertaining to ethics. Ethics-focused questions appear not just in the implementation section of the agenda, but throughout all the sections that they studied. Okay, so some examples that were given or presented in the research was under the ethics topics. And these focus questions came from various regional agendas. In Asia, the emphasis was on teaching and learning ethics. In Australasia, building reciprocal and ethical community engaged partnerships. And in Europe, ethics in implementation. So in institutionalization, the key themes were things that we are all familiar with. Several of the regional agendas have questions about examining how to institutionalize service learning and community engagement in the light of leadership changes in institutions. Research questions regarding faculty incentives and rewards, promotion and advancement are also prevalent in all agendas. The post-COVID research topic had some common key themes in the section as far as regional agendas are concerned. For example, from the North America Regional Agenda, you see how this COVID has impacted on the racial tension coupled with COVID changing the desire and level of engagement between educators, students, and communities. Post-COVID, some additional themes pertain to this work. As with implementation, we also find ethic questions in this section. There are also questions focused on mental health, which is a growing area of service learning and community engaged research, and definitely an issue that will gain importance in the future research. I want to add that if you look at this, the table here, it's about community impact, technology issues, which we've already discussed today, mental health, and then standing out again, ethics. So this is a display of the themes from the equity and social advancement section of all the regional research agendas. This display shows the differences in how the different regions approach this issue. I want to point out the one that is under Africa critical reflection at the bottom, social justice and impact, compared to Australia, which is cultural safety. In Europe, student diversity and student access. In North America, interpersonal relationships. And Southern Latin American, benefits of strengthening equity and social advances. Okay, so in equity and social advancement, there are key themes that come out here. Conceptualization definitions, responsiveness and best practices, and regional distinctions. The main finding is that there are regional distinctions in how equity and social advancements are conceptualized and defined. This table lays out the lenses through which equity and social advancements are viewed by the different regions. The small x in the Asia column in the race row means that there was only one question on this issue. So again, in cross-cultural, cross-regional, the same questions regarding ethics appear again. Okay, so the data collection forums, which began in March 2019 in Hong Kong at the Poly University there, followed the same format, process and protocol at each university. Participants walk through all 10 sections of the research agenda and submit these research questions and issues to advance the service learning and community engagement field. Here are the meetings that were held each year. And with that, we've come to the end of the presentation. I thank you.
Con esto llegamos al final. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Bibi, again. Thank you for taking on this challenge of filling in Andy's shoes. I'm sure you have questions, comments, but we are running very late, so we will leave it for tomorrow. But let me highlight 2 points in this panel. Bibi was just saying that this agenda started with work in 2019 and gathering all information from the 5 regions to get to an agenda in 2025 took all those years, and this is the starting point for doing research in the next few years. The same happens to us with our researchers meetings. We are in the 7th edition, but we had to suspend them during the pandemic, but that gives us the possibility of having an exchange among researchers. We thank you all for your presence. Please approach other researchers. Those of you who want to start doing research, well, as I told you, there is a workshop tomorrow, and you can also refer to our materials on the website. Now I give the floor back to Paula and Gerardo, and we will be done.